The Egyptians focus on strong leadership to lead their aggressive armies to quick victories. They may not have heroes with stories passed down for millennia, but their monuments to the gods stand to this day, so they were doing something right. But how do they play in Age of Mythology Retold? Let's take a look and find out. First of all, resource gathering. The Egyptians gather resources similar to the Greeks, but with some minor differences. Their labourers gather food, wood and gold, but they have one building for each resource, allowing a closer drop-off point and upgrades for faster gathering. Favour is generated by monuments, which can be built by labourers. These start small, but large ones are unlocked the more you build, bringing in more income and area of effect. Let's now go through the units shared by all Egyptian armies. First up, their heroes, priests. These are a pretty multi-purpose unit. First of all, they are scouts, allowing you to turn on auto-scouting so they uncover the map for you. They can also build obelisks, granting a large area of vision for a cheap cost. They can heal allied units, and they can also take part in combat. Their range damage is fairly low, but has a nice bonus versus mythics, so they work well as an early counter to any mythic units. Their defense is abysmal however, so keep them well back from threats, or they will die in moments. We also have pharaohs. These drop the scouting but turn on basically everything else. They can still heal and can now also empower buildings, which essentially makes them better wherever they're doing, so think quicker resource generation or recruitment. They can pick up relics and drop them up at temples for faction bonuses, and of course they can take part in combat. Much more damage than priests, with a little less mythic bonus to balance things out. Also quite a bit tougher, but still not the tanks of your armies. Keep them well back targeting mythics and healing key targets whenever possible, and they should do fine. Coming to the infantry, first up we have mercenaries. These are unlocked from the start of the game, but for good reason. They're decent melee combatants with okay damage and defense, especially for an Age 1 unit. However, their HP begins draining from the moment they spawn, so they are more used as a defensive unit rather than something you can actually use in your armies. They cost quite a chunk of gold for something that disappears in a matter of moments, but they recruit extremely fast, so if you need some quick defenders and you are desperate, then they'll get the job done. Spearmen are a pretty standard defensive unit with decent defense stats for the early game and really low damage with a bonus versus cavalry. Really nothing all that special, but will serve as a strong defensive backbone that scales really well with later upgrades. You can just send them in to hold the line to protect backlines units and mythics, or you can target cav to up their damage. Axemen drop some defense from spearmen as well as a little bit of base damage, but gain a massive damage boost against infantry, making them into frontlines powerhouses. They can chew through enemy infantry in moments, but will likely take some hits for their troubles. Especially against ranged, they're extremely vulnerable, so try to clear out threats or at least keep them busy before moving in. Next we have the Slinger, the one and only ranged unit of the Empire. They're pretty weak with medium range and low damage that's only really effective versus other ranged units. Early on they can counter super weak melee units, but later on you'll want to phase them out or only target ranged as that base damage is just abysmal versus anything else. Coming to the cavalry, first up the mercenary cavalry. Similar to regular mercenaries, they cost quite a chunk of gold and recruit very quickly, but also drain health from the moment they spawn. They have reasonably high defense with a small bonus versus ranged. Their defense is also pretty decent alongside their speed, but it still doesn't change the fact on how you should use them. If you need fast defensive units in a desperate situation, then go for it. Otherwise, leave them out. Chariot archers are much stronger range damage than the slingers with more range, base damage, and a small bonus versus infantry. This makes them a great option for targeting pretty much everything, and with that speed it can absolutely do that. They're pretty weak against all forms of damage, so keep them out of as much danger as you can, as they really are extremely weak if they get caught out. Just keep them on the flanks, targeting whatever they can, and they'll get great value. The Camel Riders are a very fast-moving cavalry unit with some pretty great damage. The bonus versus other cavalry, combined with their high speed, makes them great cav hunters, but if you want to instead use them to attack ranged, then that would also work great too. The only bad target would be infantry, as their defense is dangerously low, so they likely wouldn't come out on top. War Elephants are much slower than even infantry units, but they do come with some massive damage and tankiness. Their damage is extremely high in the bonus versus buildings, makes them chunk through enemy structures like they're nothing. The large HP combined with the high defense makes them very difficult to get rid of, so use them to charge for enemy defensive buildings and take them out before they can get value. Otherwise, most things in the enemy lines are fair game, just get them fighting and they'll likely do well. Coming to the Navy, first up we have the Kemenit. These are the arrow ships of the Empire, so that means medium range and high damage with a fast rate of fire. It's nice and speedy, so it can get into a position or out of danger fairly easily. Its defenses are also pretty strong with the exception of crush damage, so as long as it's not targeted by siege units, it should be just fine. Target enemy melee ships to make the most of their lower arrow defense, otherwise keep it back and firing for as long as possible. The ramming galley are the close quarters combat ships of the Empire. They come with massive melee damage and high speed, allowing it to close the gap fast and deal massive damage. It's okay defensively but very weak to arrow ships, so try to either stay out of their range or focus them down to keep it safe. And the War Barge is the siege combat ship of the Empire. That means massive range, crush damage, and a bonus versus arrow ships. It's great chewing through them from a safe distance as well as structures, allowing them to clear out enemy defenses for a landing party. They are supremely squishy with low melee and crush defense, making them extremely vulnerable. Keep them well back targeting arrow ships and buildings, and they should do great. And lastly, the transport ship. Very basic transport ship with high speed, okay defenses but low HP and the ability to transport up to 25 allied units. Keep them out of all danger and ensure they have a safe landing zone, otherwise they'll sink in seconds, taking all your units with them. The siege units, first up we have the siege tower. This is a melee siege unit with some massive crush damage, making it only effective versus buildings. It's pretty tanky against most forms of range damage, but extremely vulnerable to melee, making it a great option for transporting your melee troops to the front lines, while deploying them to take out any resistance. If you need to get through walls and towers and keep your units safe while you're at it, these are the units for you. Catapults are the primary source of crush damage for any ground force. Massive range with pretty massive damage, especially against buildings and ships, where that crush damage would obliterate health bars in seconds. Of course, extremely slow and vulnerable to melee, so keep it well back and protected at all times. Target defensive structures first to keep your army safe, then any other buildings left standing. For mythics, we have the Leviathan. This is a very strong melee naval monster. It has a huge melee damage with bonus versus other mythics, making it a real terror of the seas. It's also extremely tanky with loads of HP and strong defense versus all kinds of damage. The only real danger is hero units, so as long as it avoids those, it should do great work. The War Turtle has less HP, but aside from that, much stronger than the Leviathan. It deals massive melee and crush damage, making it chew through most ships like they're nothing. It also has great defense versus all and a high speed, making it nearly impossible to stop without getting severely outnumbered. It's just a super strong all-round unit without a really bad way to use it. And lastly, the Titan. This is exactly what you'd expect. Massive HP and defense to all kinds of damage, huge damage in an area with bonuses versus almost everything, making it a real one-unit army. Not the fastest, but once it gets where it's going, it'll wipe whatever it finds from the map in seconds, and it has the Titanic smash ability to send small units flying for massive damage. However, the ability to have massive style can only be gained through sweet merch like this bodybuilder shirt available right now for 5% off until the end of October with code UNDEAD, link in the description. Come now to the 3 Empire gods for Egypt. First up, Ra. He grants faster food collection, allowing for much larger armies early on, has a strong focus on the various cavalry units, and allows priests to empower monuments and allows empowered monuments to empower nearby buildings. For his unique ability, he has Rain. This increases the farming speed of all villagers on the map, but yours get the most bonuses. It's a great option in the mid-game as you transition to using more farms and want to rush some extra food. And he also grants research, which increases the toughness of your labourers. For his god choices, at age 2, he has Bast and Ptah, at age 3, Sobek and Sekhmet, and at age 4, Osiris and Horus. We also have Isis, not that one. She can field a much larger population than anyone else. Her monuments prevent the use of enemy god powers and heal nearby allied units, and all technology costs are reduced, and obelisks can be built cheaper and faster. Her unique ability is Prosperity, and this increases the gold gathering rate of all your villagers and trade caravans. It's always great if you need to get some extra gold, and she also unlocks research to grant permanent food income. For her god choices, at age 2, we have Bast and Anubis, at age 3, Sobek and Nephthys, and at age 4, Osiris and Thoth. And lastly, we have Set. He allows his pharaohs to summon animals of Set, his priests can convert wild animals at the cost of some of their food value, his infantry and ranged units gain increased speed, recruitment buildings can be built at a reduced cost, and monuments reduce the cost of units recruited in nearby recruitment buildings. His unique ability is Vision, and this grants vision of a tagged area of the map. This is useful when you want to get some intel before moving into an area or attacking an enemy village. He also grants research that grants more uses of this vision more quickly. His unique units are the Beasts of Set. This is a set of summonable beasts you unlock as you progress through the ages. They can be used in combat or simply harvested for food. I'm not going to cover each unit in detail as they all do about the same thing. They have very low damage and tankiness, so are much better used as a food source rather than in combat unless you are truly desperate. For his god choices at age 2, Anubis and Ptah, at age 3, Nephthys and Sekhmet, and at age 4, Thoth and Horus. Lastly, we come to the age gods. First up, we have Bast. Her god power turns the entire map to nighttime, which increases the power of your mythic units and the rate your monuments generate favor. This is of course really useful during attacks to boost unit stats and keep favor coming for additional ability usage. Her mythic unit is the Sphinx. This is a very strong all-round melee unit. It has some high damage with some strong crush, making it strong versus all kinds of enemies. Pretty respectable defense across the board, and decent HP make it very hard to take out without a hero. High speed also means it can get anywhere it wants to without being caught, no problem. Get into backlines to take out range before bringing it into the front lines to target mythics with that bonus. As long as it avoids heroes, it should be just fine. And her research increases the food and wood gathering rate from all sources, and upgrades the stats of Sphinx units. Ptah allows you to teleport your own allied units to a target location on the map, and this of course a great option if you want to get the drop on enemies. His mythic unit is the Wadjet. These are fairly fragile ranged mythics. Their missiles deal some medium damage alongside damage over time at a high rate of fire, adding up to some pretty great damage over the course of a battle. Their defense is very low to either melee or ranged, so keep them well back and firing, especially with their slow movement speed. The research increases the damage of axemen and slingers, increases the defense of spearmen, and reduces the cost and build time of farms. Anubis' ability summons serpents from the ground or sea to damage enemies in the area. This is useful to damage enemies in an area during a large battle, or at the very least to slow them down. His mythic units are the Nubites. These are very fast moving melee attackers with high damage and decent toughness. They can close the gap quickly with their high speed and leap ability and deal a ton of damage once they land. The only real threat to them is heroes, so feel free to attack whatever they want outside of that. His research increases the stats of Nubites, grants spearmen divine damage over time, and increases the favor generation rate of monuments. Sobek can summon locusts in a target area to deal damage to enemy units and buildings, as well as devouring food sources and farms. This is really great to combine with a smaller attack force to set enemies back rather than take them out completely. For his mythic units, he has a rock. This is a pure transport unit, allowing up to 20 units to climb aboard and be flown anywhere they like. It's relatively tanky with high HP, but it is pretty vulnerable to range damage and not the fastest, so keep it out of as much danger as possible, as if it's shot down, your units inside will not have a great time. He also has the Pesuchos. This is a powerful ranged mythic monster with decent range damage and some divine bonus damage, making it a great option to target pretty much anything. Relatively tanky to most forms of damage, but as with all ranged, keep it out of melee so it can keep firing and dealing damage for as long as possible. It's not the fastest unit in the world, so positioning will be key to keep it safe. His research upgrades the Pesuchos range, reduces the construction cost and time of buildings and increases HP, increases the HP stats of camel units, and grants Kebonits a passive sea snake summoning ability for added damage. Sekhmet allows you to transform a target owned or allied town center into a citadel. This obviously makes the building much tougher to take down, but mythic units are the Scarabs, and these are some very strange melee mythics, with very high health but low defense in melee, making them quite risky to use at the one thing they can do. Their speed is slow and their damage isn't all that great unless it's against buildings, so really charge down those defenses to get some value. When they do die, they deal a large amount of damage to nearby enemy units, so get some final value before they go out. Her research increases the range of chariot archers, increases the bonus damage of slingers, grants combat regeneration for scarabs, and enables construction of catapults in age early, and increases the crush damage of all siege weapons and mythic units. Nephthys summons dead soldiers or ships to fight for a short time. If you're starting to run low on troops during a battle, then use this to bring them back. The mythic unit is the Scorpion Man. This is another high damage monster unit with decent speed and toughness. Very high damage attacks that can be devastating versus other mythics, alongside their additional damage over time. Frontlines works great with their extremely high damage output, but with their speed, backlines are also an option, so it really all comes down to what you need. Her research grants you a small amount of gold whenever a human unit dies, increases the healing rate and damage bonus to mythic units of pharaohs and priests, and reduces the cost of priests. And lastly, she grants Leviathan units a chance to spawn when war barges die in combat. Osiris has the ability to transform a target pharaoh into a lightning-wielding son of Osiris demigod, which is never a bad idea to use since it makes your pharaohs even bigger threats in combat. These Son of Osiris heroes now have a huge amount of divine range damage with a bonus versus mythics, making it absolutely chunk any myth units in moments. Defense is okay across the board, but they're super slow, so position them well to keep them really safe. They're much better suited to combat now, so don't keep them back at base no matter what. These mythic units are mummies. These are another powerful ranged mythic monster with very high range damage. The bonus versus mythics make it chew through them in moments, but anything is fair game with damage this high. Speed is pretty decent and defense is alright, but not the greatest in melee. Keep it well back and safe to deal your best damage for the longest amount of time, plus it can curse enemy units to deal damage over time and summon them as minions if they fall whilst under the influence. His research increases the stats of camel rider units, allows 2 pharaohs at once in the Empire, upgrades the damage, health and speed of camel rider units, and upgrades the stats of mummies. Horus summons a cyclone that will suck units and buildings into the sky, however friendly fire is possible, so keep it well out of the way of your units. His mythic unit is the Avenger. This is a high speed, high damage and high defense mythic that can really take on anything. It's pretty tanky to all forms of damage, and once it closes the distance, it will deal a massive amount of damage very quickly, especially against other mythics. Add on the ability to spin and deal huge area damage, and it's a real powerhouse damage dealer in any large-scale fight. His research increases the damage of axemen and makes them more effective versus buildings, increases the damage of spearmen, and increases the health and speed of all infantry. Lastly, we have Thoth. His ability bombards the target area with meteors, dealing massive damage to buildings, which is of course very useful for dropping it on an enemy base for some huge building damage. His mythic unit is the Phoenix. These are very high damage ranged mythics. Their range is short, but their damage is high and in an area, so can clear out groups of enemies in moments. They're not the toughest in the world, especially in melee, so keep them safe and away from other enemy flyers, and they should be fine, and bring you some very nice value. Plus, if they do die, they drop an egg on the ground that can hatch a new Phoenix if left alone by enemies. His research causes empowered recruitment buildings to double their recruited units, increases the resource gathering speed of the Empire, and increases war elephant damage and reduces their recruitment costs. And that's everything there is to know about the Egyptians in Age of Mythology Retold. Let me know what culture you'd like to see next in the comments below. Like, subscribe, become a member to see yourself in the credits, and if you want more Age of Mythology videos, then check out my complete beginner's guide.